that's so generously supported our school system in general and the gifted program in particular. Some communities don't do that. A community walking tour, regardless of who creates it, including elementary students, should look like it was done by a professional public relations firm. It should be an asset to the community, creating a rich experience for local citizens and visitors alike. Now, some have asked, so what is a QR code enhanced walking tour? Semi-permanent to permanent. I say semi-permanent because the people making signs say, well, they have a 6 to 8 year life guarantee, but if you've got good weather, sometimes they last 20 years. Just like any other no parking sign or speed limit sign. But they're placed in an appropriate manner in a safe, accessible, public right-of-way, not on private ground, in a way that attracts and engages visitors by providing multiple means of understanding the significance of the location of the tour. Specifically, the signs, the size, and durability of a speed limit or snow emergency street sign will contain three things. A brief overview of the person or place that the site is about. A historical or current picture of the person or the place, and then a QR code. Most people know what it is, but just in case, it's one of those little square things that's kind of like a barcode, but when you scan it with your cell phone, it will take you to a video. And the students will be creating Ken Burns-like videos that instead of just typing out their report, here is my report on the whatever, they're going to have to find out interesting things about it, et cetera, and narrate a slideshow. The students have looked at 2 or 3 QR code sites throughout the country, and there's one in Faribault, Minnesota that is done particularly well, and that's being used as the model on which we're basing it. The site content and the way the signage looks is all the students' gift. It's their work. It's going to be part of their social studies grade and then becomes their gift to the community. We've had some questions. Funding for this project has been requested in a grant application. While it's premature for me to publicly comment on any specific application, I can say that I was encouraged by the response I received when I delivered the proposal. There have been some legitimate concerns that have been brought to my attention even today. The first is whether these signs would violate any city ordinance regarding yard signs. As I mentioned before, they would be in public right-of-ways, attached maybe to the very same signpost that already has a speed limit sign or some other sign, wherever possible. And if a post needed to be set, of course, it would have to be done within the same public right-of-way. Another concern involves placing signs on private property. Again, not private property, public right-of-way. And finally, I was presented with a good question of whether this sign at the location QR code based thing was going to duplicate any other existing walking tour in Mount Vernon. To the best of my understanding, after talking with Jeff Gotke, the president of the Knox County Renaissance Foundation, the walking tour in Mount Vernon that currently exists is in the form of a booklet. And that he's expressed to me his thoughts that a QR code enhanced walking tour would be a good thing, and has even offered his assistance to me in helping any way he can. So I'd like to thank you again, and then be glad to entertain any other questions.
Mark, let me ask a couple of things.
Yes, sir.
You and I have had the discussion, and I've talked to council members about this. Putting something in the right-of-way, I think, might be a problem.
Maybe I'm using a wrong word?
Well, if you, like we have in the city here, we have tree lawns and that sort of thing. Putting a sign out there, we prefer that it not be put on a utility pole. If we had a city sign of whether speed, no parking, maybe that would be possible. I think it's a matter of making a choice of that. There may be some where you could get cooperation from a private owner. But one thing should be pointed out, and you're going to be, I assume, the only thing I had and they have is the monument on the public square as a potential site. If you choose, let's say, General Morgan's house, and I don't know if you're going to choose that sort of thing. Are you familiar with General Morgan's house?
I am, sir. But he's not on the list.
Okay.
He didn't make the cut.
All right, well, using that, there are some perhaps some homes that would have private residency. And some people should be brought in on this discussion, because if there's a sign, whether it's on their property or near their property, that's basically going to give some information about their property, probably they ought to be aware of that, I
would think, yes.
And so I would say that because we had the conversation about private versus public, and I think that public right-of-ways and the tree lines and that sort of thing may not be the best place unless there's already a sign there.
Yeah, obviously that when we have a stack of 21 signs and give them to you, we would defer to where you thought they would be wise.
And we would prefer, possible to make them, you have 24 by 18, I think.
I think so.
We would prefer that maybe a sign a little more closely related to our normal street signs, and that's, the sign you're suggesting.
12 by 18? Is that something like that?
12 by 18 would be a better size for us.
That's doable.
But I don't want to dominate. I just want to say, I've had conversations today with some council members, also with Mary Ann.
I think I thought when I got
And
quotes,
so-
I'd rather have a quote that was high than low.
And
And I have a list of things that the students are already working on, if that's appropriate to give to you.
And we did talk about legislation when you and I talked the last. First time, I think, I talked to our law director, after talking to him, we felt that a proclamation, which all of you have seen in your packets, would be more appropriate, which indicates a support of council if they elect to pass that. So,
Thank you.
sorry, Susan didn't want to
That's
dominate. but-
no, that's fine. I wasn't quite sure how this was going to go, so I
Gotta
appreciate
catch
you
most of
jumping
your
in,
questions.
because I didn't know. I'm curious, how were the 21 stops or signs determined?
We sat down first, being teachers and being involved in Common Core and the content standards.
Yeah, I understand that.
We looked through the content standards and brainstormed what places in town meet these standards for
Okay.
third graders, what for fourth, what for fifth. Then we tried to make sure that we would have 3 or 4 more than what we would have groups, so students wouldn't cry when they
Sure.
had only one
Yeah,
left.
yeah.
And we let them choose what they wanted
Okay,
to do.
okay. And will the administration, it sounds like the administration, council, other groups in the city have input into the wording on the signage, so we can make sure it's accurate?
I think I'd be more than happy to submit it to you, but
Yeah.
for a final review.
Yeah, I think
But-
that's important,
Yeah,
probably,
but-
because I just know that there's so many different versions, just, when
Of
I
the
worked
truth.
on my cemetery tour for a few years, there's so many different versions of,
Yes.
of stories out there. We all know that, that you can find. And I think if we were going to have something that was going to be long, lasting, that we want to make sure it's the one
Could you and I?
best story.
Could you and I liaise on that? Could you be
Sure,
that liaison?
certainly, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And the only other thing is I feel like this group needs to be kept, apprised of, their progress and the status
Would
of. you know.
emailing Mayor Mavis and having him forward it to you
Yes,
be
yeah,
appropriate?
that would be very appropriate, as long as, as the administration, the city knows,
Sure.
what's going on and what the,
My superintendent's
the
asked to be
progress, yes.
carbon copied on those too.
Okay. And I'm sure there are other questions.
Mark,
Yes, sir.
if I might, I'm sorry, Sam. First, welcome to our community.
Thank you.
Just after talking to you, and you said you're new here, let's
Felt
just start
welcomed
off
ever
with
since we got here.
a welcome. And I do appreciate the fact that I love history. And above that, I love the history of this city. And I spoke with Mary Ann last night, and we had some concerns, but after speaking with you, I think it's admirable that you're including the kids. You're stepping up to bring more activity into the community and create that sense with the kids where they have a bond with it in history with what's going on in their own city. So I do want to hand that out to you and appreciate the fact that you got to meet Mary Ann, and hopefully with the Knox County Renaissance Foundation, the kids can kind of be mentored through what they're going to do as far as the not doing their work, but they'll have the ideas come from folks like that too.
We love input. Yes,
Just
sir.
a real quick question, because I know we're past our time here, but what is the point of entry for somebody wanting to follow the tour? Is there a printed document, a card, if you will, or something that says,
In the budget,
here
we-
are the sites that?
In the budget, we've included money for a brochure that fits into a number
Okay.
10 envelope, as well as business cards. My fifth graders in particular are excited about April and May, because they have to have their work done in order for it to be on the signs by then. And they're excited about marketing. Somebody put a bug in their ear about marketing, and they are just chomping at the bit.
Terrific.
I mean, we've talked about QR codes on cupcakes and everything, so, you know, they're really excited. So, yeah, we'll have brochures and cards that, for area businesses. Point of entry is wherever you see one, and then a map, of course.
I guess by point of entry, I was referring to what is the vehicle that lets people know this even exists, and you've answered that. with
And
the
social
brochure.
media, and hopefully we will be, you know, invited to speak on the radio.
Certainly.
I've been invited already to speak to a board or have kids present to a board, so we're looking for doing that in April and May.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard you mention presenting the signs to the mayor. You do understand that there is no financial responsibility on the part of the city, including the placement of signs, including any expense. Is that correct?
That wasn't my understanding, but it could be. And we'll just look for more funding.
What, Mark, I'm not sure where Mrs. Vale's referring to, but when you and I had a conversation, you have a budget there. None of that budget is intended to be provided by the city of Mount Vernon.
That is correct. And in the budget, I have listed for posts, where posts need to be put. Unless I misunderstood you, sir, which is possible, you suggested that the city crews might put up the signs.
In a public right-of-way where there would be already signs, I think it would be difficult. I think we'd have to look at whether or not we could put another sign in that public right. The tree lawn is difficult, as I spoke earlier. That's difficult. That doesn't mean that we, you know, if we have somebody out doing things like taking the baskets down that we do downtown, I mean, there's certain things we can do. We do not and cannot, you know, provide a lot of assistance, I suppose.
Can I ask
You even mentioned the posts that the city would need to be supplying the posts.
I put money in the budget for that.
utility poles currently.
Pardon?
So even that, the city will assume no financial responsibility.
I would assume not.
That would be only by legislation at some time in the future
Yes, ma'am.
if council should pass something like that.
And in my grant proposal, I've requested $900 for posts.
Can I ask a quick
Okay,
question?
one
since
more,
we're
then
running
the
one time?
waiver.
Mayor, for clarification, and what's the difference, public, where you said we could put posts where we couldn't? The tree lawn is compared to the public right of way?
Well, we have signs in the tree lawn now, as, you know, as various signs, whether they be speed signs, no parking signs, or what have you. So if, in fact, one of those was in a proper location to whatever Mark's project is, it'd be my opinion, we could put a sign on there. I mean, I'm not sure I'm answering the question, Mike, but
Well, there are certain types of posts that you can't put signs on. We can't put signs on traffic control devices. We can't put signs on utility poles. All of those are for, we can't do that. So,
we wouldn't put on any we can't put on.
Maybe what needs to be done is to look at the potential area, list of places where these signs are going to be placed before the students do all the work, in case there, you know, some of the signs cannot be placed
The
at all.
students will do the work, even if you folks said, we
Yeah.
don't want any signs. They would still do the work
Well,
and create
okay.
their videos.
Okay.
We just couldn't put signs up.
Okay, but it would be nice if they did the work that the signs
hope
could be
so.
placed, and maybe, you know.
Well, thank
that-
you for being here this evening.
Thank you, sir.
We
Okay.
are way over, so we're
That's
going to
fine.
adjourn that committee meeting.
Okay.
We're going to move on to the jail, because we have a tight agenda tonight.
I'm not, Mr. President, I'm not willing to sign this proclamation tonight.
That's your prerogative. The other people that want to sign it can. Okay, we move on to the jail contract, and that's Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, as I told the mayor before the meeting, I'm in my 9th year on city council. And I remember clear back, even Charlie Dice, 8 years ago, We sit down in November, we say, jail contract, county commissioners come to us, this is the contract for the year, this is what we'd like to have, and every year the question comes up, can we do better? And every year the question comes up, do we need a jail contract? Do we have to jail people there? So on and so forth. I was hoping the chief of police would be here, but I don't see him just yet. He had some very good input. We have met once on this project. It just seems like for about 3 or 4 months, we've tried to get together. We've had changes in positions and with the chief, with Rob's position, everything, and it just hasn't come together quite like I wanted to. We meet with the county commissioners, I believe it's the 10th, it's our next meeting. This will come up once again. I don't think, has anybody seen anything from the commissioners yet on the contract?
No, but the agreement was, verbally agreement was, Mike, that Rob would talk to the prosecutor, and they would discuss some issues. We all know there's some issues where the existing contract could be tweaked. We still have a contract, but it would be modified somewhat, and so I guess I would defer to
Well,
Rob.
and just so I could, just to inform the public, Robert, I don't mean to interrupt, but just to, before we go back to maybe more in-depth discussion, the discussion, and I'll let Rob explain a little deeper, is do we need to jail people under city code, state code, those type of codes? And I wish the chief of police was here because he did have some very good input. And the fact, counsel, when you talk about the jail contract, we also have several contracts we do with the county. And I think Mr. Scott put it well. The money goes to the county pretty much in a chunk, and they do what they want to. They prefer this for the jail. I think if I'm saying that correctly, Terry. So when we think about this, don't think about just the jail contract. There'll be, I believe, the EMA's up this year, and also public defender again, if I'm not mistaken. Public defender, yes.
The EMA is an annual contribution, Mike, so it is.
They
every-
did want an increase last year, though, if I remember correctly, so it'll probably be discussed again. Rob, thank you.
Well, is that, what happens is that whenever the police department takes out a prisoner to the jail, they are booked in under, whether they've committed a violation of one of the city ordinances, and then with the, or when the sheriff's office takes someone out, it's a violation of the revised code. Is that the way that we have traditionally paid for people has been based upon what agency brought them out. Now, that gets kind of strange because the police department can charge people under the city code. They can also, under the city ordinances, they can also charge them under the revised code. Additionally, people commit felonies here in the city that are charged by the police department, and those are all under the revised code. And so what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to figure out exactly which people the city has previously been paying for and which people we should be paying for. Because even though someone may have been brought out by a police officer and booked into the jail, we're only responsible for those people who are charged with violations of the city ordinance. It gets a little stranger even beyond that, because you have some people who are charged under both for a felony for the revised code as well as for a misdemeanor under the city code, which is something else that I just realized as I was working on this weekend. So we have a number of different ways that people can get out there and under different policies. And we just need to make sure that we're paying for the right set of people and their charges. And that's been the biggest thing that Mr. McConville and I have been discussing as we go back and forth. As the mayor, Mr. Hillier, also mentioned, the city and the county are interconnected. It's not only the jail contract, but it's the EMA, it's the work that we do out at the brush recycling. We collaborate on the health department and the dog warden. And there are a series of payments, and as Mr. Scott said, is that we make a donation, we make a payment into the general fund. We actually don't send a check to the sheriff's office. So in reality, from the city's point of view, it doesn't matter whether we're paying for the jail or the dog warden or the health department or things like that. It really matters is what is the total number we're paying into the general fund of the county. And so what we've been trying to do is to sort of figure out exactly how that is that what numbers, what we're paying from the jail contract and this and that. Because what we don't want to get into is a position where we're basically negotiating against ourselves, which is they bring up this one thing, we come to an agreement on, say, the jail contract, then they bring up the next thing. And so, at least from our standpoint, it strikes me, and as I've been discussing with Mr. McConville, the issue becomes is, what is the total amount the city's going to pay, and, what's the most efficient way to get at that number?
Mr. Scott, do you like to input on this, or strictly note-taking basis at this point?
Just putting my brains down on paper, it won't take very long. Following what Rob just shared with you folks, and I quickly made a note here of a number of them in regards to our collaboration with the county. EMA for $6,000. Your
How much
jail
did you say?
$6,000. Your jail contract is a little over $330,000. The public defender is $20,000. The health department is $50,000. And the humane officer and animal control, and I don't have those exact numbers with me, but I'm going to say they're in the range of about $10,000 to $12,000. And then we have the Knox County Airport, which we provide funding for. I think that's about about $6,000 maybe. And those are the ones I can quickly come up with. So you can see there's a large source of dollars here that come together, and they're all interconnected.
What about
Whether or
public
not
defender?
you
You
raise
said
one
that's
and lower
20K.
one, all of those are all up for discussion as to how you go about doing that. And Rob was right in regards to the officer that takes it out is checked off, that's the city, that's the city, that's the city, and not necessarily as to what they were charged for. And I think if I recall in the meeting we had, delineating that type of information from the county records is a little challenging to do, I believe, in that regards. So, unless you sit and manually work that out and figure that all out, to figuring out which type of charge they were charged under. And we continue to have the discussion, do we just flip everything over to the state statute and eliminate a lot of what the city has in their ordinances and forego the fine money? Is that an equitable type thing in that regards? And that still is an item to be discussed. However, we still have some ordinances on the book that are not covered by state statute, so they don't mirror each other. So the need to have a jail contract would still be of essentials. And the reason for doing so, as we've talked internally with our discussions, the chief and all those were having the same thought, is without a jail contract at any point, if we were to take a prisoner to the jail, we could be subject to the refusal if the county so wanted, because there may be a demand for beds for other purposes, okay? And if that be the case and they don't have enough reserves, then they may refuse, and we would have to do something else with the individual or release, whatever the case may be. So there's lots of discussions in regards to how to go about putting this together, and where the calculations of whether or not in the past years were we overcharged, maybe because of the felony issues or other state statute people that were charged in regards to the services. Now, I know the mayor and I can remember the days when we didn't have a jail contract and we paid as we go. And back in those days, we also had to deal with medical claims, all of those types of things we got billed for, and it was a challenge to try to track and determine whether or not we were being billed properly for our own prisoners. So the concept of creating what we know as your jail contract today was more devised to just eliminate all of that, say this price will cover these items, housing, food, medical, whatever. It's just one price covers the whole thing. So, we still have we still have the discussion to continue on. Whether or not we'll get a conclusion before your meeting with the commissioners, we'll leave that up to Mr. Hilliard and the administration to work on this and figure out what is the most equitable thing. But there are a lot of other interrelated, and as you heard from some presentations last year about some of the demands or the requests, in some cases, for additional funding towards the county's general fund, you'll have to decide if those represent themselves again this year as well, so.
Remind us, we had, the jail increase last year was 2.5%?
3%.
3%. And public defender, they wanted quite an increase on that, if I'm not mistaken, but we were under contract.
Right, we still have a contract at 20,000. I believe the request was for at least 25 or 30 because of the additional costs that they were incurring.
And EMA was asking for additional monies as well, if I'm not mistaken, because of some of the things they're trying to do.
Trying to implement, that's correct. And that was well over $10,000, maybe $12,000.
I quickly, with my math skills, I come up with about 422,000 off the numbers that you had given us, so, at this point, if maybe, Chief, you walked in kind of in the middle of the conversation, I did enjoy your input you had the day we met about the jail contract, about some of the consequences and some of the ways we're doing things now. Would you care to enlighten us a little bit on that?
Ladies and gentlemen, you have to help me. I didn't bring all my notes with that, but the main thing was the concern is the collateral issues. With the jail contract set up, we know exactly what we're paying for and what we're getting. But there's a lot of other things out there that we work with the county on that I want to say we don't get billed for, or things along those lines that we could get billed for, and working with that kind of stuff. So that's kind of why I'm more in favor of keeping the contract the way it is. So, and Mike, help me out if I know some of the conversation. If
No, one of the comments you made about it is if they did do away with the contract and close the door on us, we'd probably be going to Morrow County.
yeah, we could run into a situation where we may not have beds housed for us. If they contract out and use the jail for other reasons or other counties, and then we only get what's available when it's available, there's a possibility we could, on an extreme measure, go there and not have beds to have use for. And if that's the case, then we have to go, outsource to some other place, and that could be, that causes man hours, it's travel, finding places. We already run into that situation with juveniles when we have to house them. So, and if I'm not mistaken, the jail's pretty full, if I'm not mistaken, what the capacity is, right?
As of I talked with the sheriff about this last week, and they've got between 60 and 70 people there right now. And technically there are 100 beds in the jail, but there are certain numbers of beds that you have to, because it's of course segregated by sex, is that if you have a pod devoted to women, you can't then go, and if you have a couple of extra beds there, put men in there. And they've also have beds set aside for work release, and they have certain segregation cells. So they're getting fairly close to somewhere between 75 and 80 is pretty much the maximum number of people you're ever really going to be able to get in there at any one time. But they are close to it, and they actually recently had to rework 2 of the dorms to move female prisoners because we had reached the maximum number of female prisoners on several different occasions recently. And while we didn't turn away people who we were bringing in, is that there were people who were being scheduled jail time out of municipal court who were said they showed up at the jail to start their jail sentence, and they were told, come back later, basically. So, when we have this sort of contract, it allows us a certain amount of, we know what's going to happen. And especially, I've watched, as the juvenile prosecutor, I watched as they would sometimes try and find beds for juveniles, and they'd be taking them to Zanesville and I
We've
forget.
had to go as far as Cleveland.
Yeah, and so, and the amount of stress that puts on the, in that case, the juvenile probation officers as well, but in our case, it would be police officers that we'd have to be paying overtime to, for transport. You'd have the additional wear and tear on the vehicles and things of that nature.
What would literally happen is we'd start be issuing summonses after arrest, and we would wind up cutting these people loose because we won't spend the man hours to try to house, even a misdemeanor offense. We'll issue summons and, have them appear in court. It would be more our ultimate goal with that. Because there's no way, if we're short-staffed or short-shifted, that we can spend the man-hours trying to find a place to house them and then transport them, and because all that responsibility would lie on us.
I have a couple of quick questions, if I might, Chief.
Sure. Too.
First of all, is the rate a capitation rate, or is it a flat rate regardless of the number of prisoners we take out there? We pay based on the,
Per person, right?
per person?
No, it's a flat
I was gonna say.
All right, so
That's a flat rate, we
It's
just
a
pay that
flat
no
rate,
matter
so
how
if our
many.
numbers are up or down, there's no change. We can predict, and they can predict that revenue and expense stream on our side. The other question is, if we were in a situation where we had to, if we didn't have the contract and we're outsourcing our prisoners to an adjacent county or something, does that also mean by implication that we lose the benefit of the video arraignment and things that you were talking about that provided some safety and savings?
Yes, with whatever's, wherever we house them, yes, we'd have to physically pull them back for arraignments. And we also have to pay whatever the housing cost is
There.
for that
Sure.
jail. So, I mean, if
Okay.
we pay as we go, and we are talking extreme cases, but if it happens once, it's gonna be, it's gonna be a problem.
Okay.
Chief, if I could, for clarification, if we did not have a contract, you had a DUI at 2:30 on Saturday morning, they could actually say, take them somewhere else, right?
If they're full, now, if they have the capacity, I would think they'd be under obligation, I can't,
But without a contract for us, they could contract with somebody and,
Correct, but they
They already-
could, go ahead, Rob.
They already do contract with
understand that,
somebody.
but they
They
can
already
seek
know
more.
that they're taking federal prisoners in.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And-
federal contract, they already have, so if those beds are already allotted to somebody else, like they say, okay, we're not gonna, Mount Vernon, so we're gonna work a tri-county area, and they work the other counties, and they fill up all their beds on commitments, we'll get whatever's available when they feel like it.
Mrs. Vale,
Yes. First of all, we also give money to CAT. The transportation.
which is MOTA, in case
What-
you're,
What has always bothered me about this is that these are taxpayer dollars. And the citizens of Mount Vernon pay into the county just as everybody in the county pays. And by all these contracts wherein we pay to the county, our taxpayers are paying twice for the same services that the entirety of the county is paying once for. So it does bother me tremendously that we have to take our tax dollars and pay a second time in behalf of our taxpayers.
with that, Rob,
Well, yeah.
with what Mrs. Vale just said, and based on that, I mean,
Well,
legally, does the county have to take them then?
Here's the thing, but in the rest of the county, the rest of the county doesn't have the option of going and recouping some of that through the use of fines if we charge them under our ordinances. So that if we didn't have the opportunity to recoup that money, is that your analogy would be exactly right, is that it is somewhat like you're saying, but because we can, if we're charging them under our ordinances, we have the opportunity to recoup some of that through fines as well as additional fees. It's not exactly a perfect analogy.
But we would be collecting that if we didn't have a contract for those who are arrested under the state code.
No. No. Is that we only collect for things that are charged under city ordinances.
That's right.
Anything that's charged under the revised code still goes to the county.
That's right. But even all the rest of these things, the city taxpayers are paying a second time for everything.
I've brought that up with the commissioners in the past several years when we did that, and they're saying that the rate that they're charging per day isn't the total cost. And they are giving us a break, and that's what they told us. They are giving us a break over what the total cost is, because we are paying into that. Because I've all used that same argument, so.
Is that, and Mr. McConville and I have discussed changing the way we calculate that to take into more explicitly that into account. And that's why I said with Mrs. Vale, it's not a perfect analogy, just because of the way the fine money gets split and things like that.
Mike,
So,
I have a question.
I know, we have time.
Okay, if we have a contract, and what you're telling me is the beds are pretty full, what happens if they get them completely full and we have a contract? What's going to happen then?
Well, if the jail is just completely staffed, I mean, full, I mean, then
well,
under that.
no, is that in that case is that they would start with people serving sentences, not with people who are being brought in for jail. Is that's how they would, what we're talking about is.
They would
people-
make room, in other words.
Is that they would make room. That there are
Yeah.
certain ways we can do that through the changing of sentences of people who are already sentenced rather than people who are waiting to be sentenced. And we would work with the municipal court to do that. But we would always, but if we have the contract, we will make sure that the people we're bringing in off the street, because we need to get them off the street, would be taken care of.
Okay, what about house arrest? If you have to take somebody out, could you put that on them and
Well,
kick them at the house?
Well, that would be, that's going to be part of their sentence. And that's something that the court would decide.
They decide that, huh?
But that's the way the court would do. The court would either let them out and then let them and then reschedule at a time, or add other controls such as house arrest or things like that.
Okay.
If I could ask, Mayor, one of the things in the past was when council gets to see the information prior to this meeting that we have. I assume the commissioners have, I understand they haven't sent anything to us on any of these contracts
No.
at this point?
Not that I know of.
I know council would like to see this information before that next meeting if we could. Generally, that's November 10th is our meeting. It's not December yet. I think we have discussed it as close as December. But I think if there's maybe a phone call by you to say, when do you plan on, letting us know what you're wanting to do? Maybe something out to council, explaining what's going on. Maybe we need to, after that information, the same group that met before could reconvene and see if we can put something together.
Mike, I have been encouraged, I talked to Rob a little bit about it before, the technology that's now available, and that goes back to Terry's point earlier. It was difficult for the charge because we never could determine the exact amount of number of prisoners, but now that, excuse me, the technology's there, that we should be able to do that. Even as you pointed out, in some years earlier, we always wanted to know if we paid them $300,000 a year, at $45 a day, how many prisoners did that pay for? When the normal charge is $65 a day, so we were getting a discount, but that depended on how many prisoners there were. That number was elusive. I'm understanding now that that number can be more defined, and that's the kind of information you're talking about getting is, how many prisoners have we had out to the jail? If we're going to pay you that, Darius, this year's what, 318 or something like that?
It's about 330 right now.
330,000. So you could get, because I think Nancy's made the issue before about, the city's paying into the county tax coffers, we know that. But if in fact the regular charge is, and do you know what the regular charge is per federal? Is it $65 a day or something?
It's at least that.
So if we're getting a discount, maybe that offsets some of these allegations that we have. But yes, Mike, I'll be glad to do that and see if I can get those numbers so you all have a feel for that.
I think that would be good. Does council agree with that? I mean,
Yes.
and if they're not prepared to do it at that meeting, then they just need to let us know when and exactly. I haven't heard anything from the public defender this year. I think, but prior to that meeting, I had a lot of information from him last year about wanting his increase. I think the deal was cut last year that, the way it ended up, we wouldn't increase the jail if we increased the public defender or some deal like that. Remember that they put on the table at the last minute. I just think everybody needs to be clear going into that meeting, so we don't sit there and go back and forth about the percentage and is it really what we want to do?
Mike, or do I hear you saying we will have a meeting before we meet with the commissioners? I think we should.
Well,
I think we should have an opportunity to discuss it among ourselves before we meet with the commissioners on this.
go ahead, Rob, then I'll reply.
Well, I don't know that it depends on whether or not when we can get the information. Because until we get the information from the commissioners, it doesn't make any sense to set up a meeting. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the issue.
Then maybe we need to delay the meeting with the commissioners until
Or
we
there'll
can
be
have a meeting
Or there'll
first.
be at least one other one beyond this one, because I'm not sure.
One other with the commissioners, or?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, if they expect to get something done at this meeting, then we're gonna need the information fairly soon.
If I might say something, I think getting the information to council would be good. I would think, this is just a suggestion, that a special meeting for just the council to discuss that single issue, because I know, Bruce, you worked long and hard to try to get a common time when we could meet. We have some time, if we meet in that meeting in November, then we'll still have some time to talk about it as a council prior to budget time and that sort of thing. So I would suggest, I don't know how that works with all of you, but sometime before is that the 8th is our next meeting?
10th.
10th. Sometime before that, we could meet, once we get these numbers from the commissioners.
Are you talking meet as a whole group before the 10th? Or,
Yeah, I would think that,
Our council.
I can detect here that there'd be satisfaction, maybe more along that line, rather than just a small committee. So I guess that's what I would
All
think.
of
so we have about 2 weeks. I mean, is everybody open to possibly putting together a special meeting
Yes.
to discuss it? I guess it's up to what you find out with a phone call and
Okay.
when and if they're gonna give us
So
any
we'll-
information. You guys good with that? I would like, if at all possible, I know everybody's got different time commitments, it's gonna be fun to try to do, but if everybody could be there, it'd be great.
Mike, it's also
I think
my-
it's important that you're happy, and that you're happy before we make a decision
Yeah,
on how we're
absolutely.
gonna deal with you.
Yes.
Mike, it's also my understanding that the adjoining counties also get that tax, or that break in the cost for housing prisoners.
That's
I've
out of
heard
my
that
realm.
before.
Go ahead, Rob.
Terry mentioned to me is that we think that the feds are paying about $75 a head.
Well, they should be paying more.
Well, they are, but I don't think that any other county, anybody else who brings prisoners in is paying that same rate. Is that nobody else gets the approximate rate that we do. Now, the
Morrow
question-
County?
In our county.
Morrow County?
Morrow County does not house prisoners here.
No,
Not at all?
no.
Is
Okay.
it just us?
They
or
have
federal?
they have their own jail. What we were talking about is if they don't have a contract with us, they could outsource to make sure they have contracts so they can cover whatever funding. I'm not saying that's something written in stone. That's just what we're showing you as a possibility.
Well, if they can
But-
make exception, if we have a contract, I don't see why they wouldn't make exception if we don't have a contract, because we still are Knox County citizens. This city is a part of Knox County,
Well,
and Knox County should be, it shouldn't matter whether or not we have a contract.
and to address that, it would be no different than any other business, Mrs. Vale, whereby I'll enter into a contract with you, and you know you're gonna get X amount of dollars in that contract throughout the year, regardless of how many times I call you for service.
But you're not paying taxes to me. I'm concerned and interested in our taxpayers.
I understand, but you have to think, the county's giving us a break because they are
You-
guaranteed $300,000. Whether we bring in 50 prisoners a year or whether we bring them 500 prisoners a year. You see what I'm saying? They're doing it from a business perspective that's saying, we're guaranteed that we know we're going to get this amount of money to help fund the operations of the jail.
Well, Mr. Scott, our first responsibility is to the taxpayers of Mount Vernon.
Well,
Go ahead.
but to deal with that, we still have what the chief has to deal with and what the law directors, the prosecutor has to deal with as well. So you've got
That's
criminal
right.
activity
I
going
agree.
on within your taxpayers.
Well, I think we need a meeting, Mr. Hilliard.
So that's exactly what we're gonna
before
try
we
to
go
put
forth.
together. Council, we have about 3 minutes. Any other input real quick?
I have just one question. Does anybody, perhaps you have this information, Chief, Relative to the total population of the jail population, does Mount Vernon provide a disproportionate amount or number of inmates for that facility compared to the rest of the county?
Yes, we've housed more inmates from the city than any other entity in the county, if that's the question.
On a per capita basis, would we be a heavier user than the rest of the county?
Oh, by far.
Well, is that, the thing about it is that a city resident can get arrested in the city or in the county, and I think that if you took a look at it, you would see more city residents arrested by both the city and the county. But that's
Correct.
just,
Correct.
Maybe the question I need to ask is, the cases that we care about are the ones under which we make the arrest, is that correct? Rather than where the
Correct.
where the perp lives, okay?
Bottom line, yes.
So in that respect, are we generating more arrests per capita?
Yeah.
Well, are we generating more arrests, given our tax base, than the rest of than the sheriff is, given the rest of the
Best of
county?
my knowledge, I'd say yeah, but Rob being the prosecutor would be able to
is that,
answer that better.
the answer is yes, and it's just, it's a simple numbers, is that on every shift you have 3 or maybe 4 sheriff's deputies who have to go and roam and respond to calls throughout the entire county.
Right.
Is that, whereas for in here, we have at least 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 police officers who are able to concentrate their work in a much smaller geographic area. And so they're not spending as much time driving to calls and things of that nature. So they're actually able to spend more time policing than a sheriff's deputy is. And because of that, we're able to get more work done, and we see significantly more numbers of prisoners from the city police department than from any other agency.
Okay, so for the tax dollars that we expend as citizens of Mount Vernon, we are probably generating a disproportionately high share of the inmate population compared to other taxpayers outside of the city of Mount Vernon. Fair statement or not?
I believe so.
Okay. That could account for some of the discrepancy.
Yes, and that's something maybe you can look up for us, Chief.
I'll see if I can find
It would be nice to know.
If I can run the stats on that for sure.
Where are the people coming
And-
from?
And just in last thing I'd like to say is, to what Nancy had said, if we have no contract and it's like anything else, and they bill us, okay, we will have to pay whatever they bill us per prisoner. So there will be it'll be regulated by them, and I would think we'd have to pay whatever they suggest.
And who's
we
going to
pay.
scrutinize the bill?
Yeah.
For each and every service provided to each and every inmate?
But remember, under the Ohio Revised Code, we don't pay the bill. The state pays the bill. So those prisoners picked up under the Ohio Revised Code are not costing us without a contract.
Okay.
Mr. Hilliard, it is 6:40, and we do have a
Thank you.
hearing
Okay.
which has a
Mayor,
specific time.
just give me a call if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, and we are adjourning that committee meeting. We're now going to have a public hearing. And during public hearings, what we typically do is we give people an opportunity, give council an opportunity to talk, turn this over to Mrs. Vale, but then we have people speaking for the issue, and then people speaking against the issue in alternate form. So, Mrs.
Mr.
Vale?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mrs. Vale, real quick,
Yes.
I am passing around a legal pad. If you would please just put your name and address for all of you so I can get it on the minutes of who is all in attendance, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Public hearing's a little more formal than a committee meeting, so we need to have that documentation.
And
Thank
that
you.
is in compliance with state law. We do need to have your names and addresses. The following motion by Mr. Swallow on the Municipal Planning Commission was seconded by Mr. Ernest, and there was a unanimous affirmative vote, including those individuals and also Mr. Mavis, Mr. Glass, and then, as I say, Mr. Swallow and Mr. Ernest. The commission accepted the application as presented to rezone the property as specified in the application. This recommendation is herewith sent to City Council for their review, which now brings us to this hearing, and we don't yet have legislation for this evening. I did talk with you today, Mayor. So it's going to be next month before we have any legislation on this. Is that so?
Seemingly so at this point. We do not have legislation
All right.
on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. It was my understanding that we would have, but I'm sorry, council, we don't. So it's going to be November and probably the first meeting in December, if we give this 3 readings. I would like to point out to you the areas as you see on the screen. The blue area is identified as being single-family residential, and the pink or fuchsia area is what's called P&D, Planned Neighborhood Development, wherein the requests for whatever is to go there would come back to the Municipal Planning Commission, and they would review whether or not it's acceptable. Then the orange color area is identified as being general business, and I think that too probably would come back to municipal planning, would it not, Mayor?
Well, there's criteria in the general business that could be allowed there. Now, if they want to do something aside from that, would have to come back.
Yes.
But
But general business is pretty open to just about anything.
there are limitations, but yes, it is
Yes.
more open.
Okay, of course, there is the space available that would have, render some control over that.
The size of that, people, because I know that's, if you're not familiar with this, that orange spot up there is, let's see, 12 acres. So, and we compared that, Nancy, I think you were at the planning commission meeting with a site, that site really is.
Lowe's was 13 acres.
Yeah, Lowe's was 13 acres. So, you know, I know we've talked about big box stores and what could go in there, but, so the acres itself kind of limits what might go
And the
there.
property owner tells me that they have no intent for putting a big box store in that area. Okay, with that,
Just for the public's,
yes.
could you show where Upper Gilcrest Road and Route 36 is on that map, so people are very clear?
Do you have the
The
beamer?
pointer doesn't work on the TVs.
Oh,
It absorbs into the
okay.
pixels.
The
Sorry.
mayor then will show us where those lines are.
This is Coshocton Road, right here. So this 2 legs of this property, which is the P&D that Mrs. Vale spoke of, could have exits here. This is the commercial, the 12-acre piece here, and then this would all be R1, single-family residential. This then is Upper Gilcrest Road coming here. So Coshocton Road intersection is out here. We have your New Hope School, and we have the health department kind of out here. So they would come down here and meet at this point here. So there would be frontage here, Upper Gilcrest would be frontage here on.
So just so I'm clear, on the orange area, which is general business, doesn't touch a neighboring property? Or it does?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand.
There's a roadway in between. The
P&D access.
identify the fuchsia area, that little tiny strip,
Yeah.
Mayor.
There's a lake coming out here, a lake coming out here. Is that,
That's P&D, so the people who have property next to there are adjacent to the P&D or general business?
well, the people, right here, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The people who are not, have not been annexed into the city, they would be, all of this would be, P&D, that yet to be determined would be the opportunity for the developer to come back to council saying, I'd like to put a park and 14 2-unit condominiums in there or something like that, so.
At the meeting, a gentleman from that area of several dwellings did question why were they not included. But the type 2 annexation that was used does not permit more than one property owner for the piece to be annexed. So that's the reason that they were not asked to participate. However, they could circulate a petition and ask to be annexed to the city.
Thank you.
May I first ask for, Mayor, did you have anything else you want to say before we ask for persons who are in favor of this to
No,
come
I
forth?
think we're prepared to move ahead with that, Mr.
All right.
Dale.
Would we please have someone who wants to speak in behalf of this?
I'm John Long with Schaefer Johnston Lichtenwalder, the engineer and surveyor on the project, representing the Beckett's.
And give us your address, please. as well.
3477 Commerce Parkway, Worcester, Ohio. Excuse me. The proposal that you have before you this evening is broken down into 59 acres, plus or minus, of single-family residential, 13 acres of PND, and 12 acres of general business. Through the process here, we were trying to come up with a zoning that would be beneficial to the property, but also beneficial to the city as a whole through not impacting the public systems as heavily as it could be if it were a much higher density use. We were looking at the PND for a couple of different reasons. It provides the possibility of a higher density residential, but also gives the city a lot of control. Anything that is proposed in the PND will go through not only the Planning Commission, but will also come back to council, the way I understand the code. So anything that happens here, you folks will have another say at after it goes through the Planning Commission as well. The single-family residential, to kind of give you some examples around town that, or at least one example around town that is fairly applicable, would be the landing over off of Yager Road, south of Yager. The general business, there's lots of.
Could I ask you to speak just a little
Absolutely.
louder so folks can hear you?
How about that? Is that better? Okay. The single-family residential, as I said, is very comparable to what you would see around the landing area, south of Yager Road, west of Upper Gilchrist. The general business does allow a lot of freedom, but the size and shape of the parcel does not lend itself well to what we call a big box store. The depth of the parcel is significantly less than what you would see at a Lowe's or Walmart, those types of facilities. So even though those types of facilities would be permitted, it's not applicable in on this particular property. One of the reasons why we were looking at general business along the frontage of Coshocton Road is as a buffer to the single-family residential. With the number of cars that do travel up and down Coshocton Road, it just didn't seem reasonable to expect single-family dwellings to be right along the road. It is kind of our tentative plan, although there are no definitive plans, that there would be some type of buffering between general business and the single-family residential. That is our expectation, although whenever the property is developed fully, that is subject to the developer's discretion. In my professional opinion, it seems as though an adequate use of the property, and I think that's all I had to say at the present moment.
You had mentioned earlier the projected size of the lots in the residential area.
The zoning code allows for lot sizes, and I assume you're referring to my presentation at the Planning Commission, Ms. Vail?
Yes.
The size of the lot can be as small as 8,500 square feet. That's pretty difficult to attain. By the time you get done laying things out, a more reasonable size of a lot would be more along the lines of a quarter acre or larger. And that also doesn't include the roadway. That's actual physical space of the lot itself. Could be a minimum of 8,500 square feet. You throw in a 60-foot right-of-way in front of it for the streets, and we're talking about many acres of this development that would be in streets themselves. But the minimum lot size, according to code, is 8,500 square feet.
That's excluding the street areas.
Excluding the street area, yes.
But I heard you say that you were projecting half-acre lots at one
I don't
point.
think I ever actually said that.
It
but
was either you or the doctor
I think it may have
indicated
been- I
that
think
they
it may
might
have
be
been me.
half-acre lots.
I think it may have been the attorney that was representing them at that time.
If wasn't mistaken, though, you did say, because it was brought up about water retention, I believe that Mr. Demery brought up the fact it could be up to 110 houses with the water retention.
Yeah, by the time you get the roadways and their water retention areas in there, I mean, those entities both take up footprint that are going to reduce the number of lots. Because the number of lots isn't an average of 8,500 square feet across the board. It's each lot would have to be a minimum of that. You take out 5 acres for water retention, 6 acres for road, and then 59 acres becomes 50 acres.
The number to 110, though, what size lot wasn't that kind of at your half acre, quarter acre?
Yeah, yes, it would be.
Okay. Okay. Council, do you have any questions to ask this
I think
gentleman?
Sam has the same.
I was going to, you started to talk about water retention, Mike, and I know one of the things that people always get concerned
yes.
about downstream is what a development like this how it would impact. It sounds like you've addressed in the residential area the adequacy of the water retention. How about on the general business? Can you just give us a little preview of how
I'll
that
be more than happy
topographically
to.
works?
At this time, there are no definitive plans for any of the projected uses here. But the city codes, as well as EPA code, are very clear on what is permitted and is not permitted with regards to water retention and runoff. And you'll have to forgive me, I haven't read this specific code real recently, but at the very minimum, it's whatever water was running off here pre-development is the rate in which it has to run off post-development. There's the added layer in there of the Ohio EPA also requires that the first 3/4 of an inch of rainfall that falls on the lot be retained for a 24 to 48 hour period. So that first 3/4 of an inch of rainfall
Should stay.
is held on site and released very slowly.
Okay, so we have every reason to expect
Absolutely.
that anything we're talking about here in terms of development is not going to add to a problem that may or may not continue to exist on Coshocton Avenue.
Correct.
If
Yeah,
I could add
that's
to that.
a problem.
I did talk to Tim Crouch today from Hiawatha Golf Course. It was brought up at one of the prior meetings about the topography, how about a half of the blue area would run towards the developmental center, then on into Hiawatha Golf Course. They do have a major concern because they get flooded all the time as it is. I don't know if that can be addressed any different, but they were very concerned about the water runoff and the direction it was heading to put more water across their golf course, which they can't handle now.
Likewise, the
And in the same conversation, they have said the problems have increased with development. So I think that's something, Dave, maybe you want to address.
Well, I can address it a little bit. I mean, if you look upstream from Hiawatha Golf Course is the center run that goes clear up along the developmental center up to above Academia up there, and there's been no development up there. The water conditions above Hiawatha Golf Course haven't changed in 50 years.
With, Mike Kepple also mentioned there how wet they are. There's no water runoff coming towards them now from Coshocton Avenue?
The only water that comes through Keppel's property, if you guys are familiar with it, is a back stormwater detention basin at the Walmart store, and that was reduced significantly after construction. They actually reduced it below the standards just to make it better for that area. And like John said, our stormwater regulations these days, they regulate the fact that the water can't leave the site any faster tomorrow than it does today, so, I mean, they really work well. Our stormwater regulation didn't go in until the early 90s, which was after about 2/3 of that Coshocton Avenue
Yeah,
development. And
that's when we had a
that's what
lot
the
of
problem is.
problems, yes.
Well, I might say that the folks who reside on Coshocton Avenue are very concerned about this also. On that piece of ground that will be general business, will there be an independent retention pond on that?
Most likely there will be, yes. Until the development plans are created, it's really an unknown. And at this time, there's no development plan on it. I will say this, your city engineer is very thorough. And whatever is submitted to him, it will get reviewed thoroughly to make sure that what is submitted to him complies with the regulation.
Because we don't want to subject those who reside along Adams Run, for instance, to a greater volume of water than what they already suffer.
Well, I again want to put that rumor to bed. None of this water goes down Coshocton Avenue. Some of this water will end up in Center Run via the developmental center around through Hiawatha, like Mike was saying.
Okay.
But as far as the Coshocton Avenue corridor, from the Center Run Bridge up to the radio station, this water does not go that direction.
Okay, so it won't go down and across Coshocton and then down Adams Run?
That's
Those
precisely
folks
what I
can
said,
be
yes.
assured of that, all right.
Where does they pointed out the front half of the blue went towards Hiawatha. Do you know where, I actually think Cameron brought that, so where does the back half run to then?
Well, I don't know where the
Colonial Woods.
divider line is there, but The one that I'm looking at, to the left, that area is the stuff that would go down toward, alongside the existing condos out there, and go into the back, near the developmental center and get into Center Run. There's a little bit of the north, see, that would be southeast corner that would go to the southeast, right? In behind all the county facilities there, back in behind the jail, that
Oh,
that
it will go
direction.
more to the east?
A little, again, I don't know where the dividing line is up there, but
Right. Okay.
I know Upper Gilcrest Road intersection is higher than the low point on Coshocton Avenue.
Right.
So the line that I was representing, I'll show it again, is basically coming down through here. That is the drainage divide where this would go to the south. And this would go to the northwest, I believe.
Okay. What about from east to west?
Well, it's pretty much all draining to a point here.
It's all going to drain toward the
and a point
west.
here, essentially. This land up here is going to come down to a point, there's a culvert underneath the road here, as well as a culvert underneath the road here, under Upper Gilcrest.
Okay. Okay, do we have further questions?
I would like to hold, I think the people in the audience came to, like to speak.
We
for
want
like
to hear
15 minutes.
folks, both sides. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, we may call you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if we may have someone who is not in favor of this project, or of this zoning, I should say. Do we have anybody speaking against this zoning? Debbie? Yes, please. You must come up and give your name and address, please.
I'm Deborah McAvoy. I live at 12092 Upper Gilcrest Road.
And speak up so folks
Okay,
can hear
I'm
you.
sorry.
You can bend that microphone, Mrs. McAvoy.
And our property lies right beside this whole property that that is in question right now. And I know the term is loosely being thrown around as we or our, and it is our opinion, or we feel that, or, it is under, our impression that such and such. And I'm not quite sure who it is, we or our, is pertaining to. Is it to Mr. and Mrs. Beckett? Is it to the developer? Is it to the purchaser of the land? I'm not sure who it is that is being, directed to when we say we, or, it's our opinion, or we feel such and such when, the lawyer was speaking. So I just wanted a clarification of that. Thank you.
Well, we'll invite you back. What was his name? What's his name? Do you remember?
You want me to come back?
Would you repeat your name for me again, please?
John Wall.
John Long. Yes, thanks. John, would you answer her question?
Well, there's basically two we's. Typically, when I speak of we, I'm speaking of the firm that I represent, because we are a firm of engineers and surveyors. In this case, I'm representing not only the we of the firm, but also the we of my client.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak positively or in favor of this projected zoning? Anyone else opposed to this zoning? Yes, Kathy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Yukis, and I reside at 17989 Coshocton Road. My property, I have 36 acres, and my property, this is my property line here. It intersects at Coshocton Road and goes down here. I believe the McAvoys are down in here. This is my parcel right here. I've addressed the council now. This is my third time, and at the risk of being redundant, I believe everyone can remember about the sentiments that I've expressed, both formal and informally. I don't want to repeat all that now, but I want to share another experience I've had, a personal one, that I feel like I really need to communicate. Actually, 2 points. One is, since our last council meeting, or the zoning commission, I've been out many times and have sat on that perimeter, as you can probably imagine. And not only from my perspective, but from the perspective of all of my neighbors who surround my property. And I want to echo, first of all, as a group, of course, that we're very concerned because of the tone of our environment there. And we do live the rural lifestyle. We've accustomed ourselves to that. We all have personal stories that reflect why we're there. And I would bet in every single case, it has to do with these issues of privacy, rural environment, wildlife, not a whole lot of population, expansive places to live and to enjoy our life. And so I've gone out there and I've sat, on my property line, and I've looked at that expanse of right now, which is soybean field and alternates to corn. And I wonder, I would like to make an invitation to all of you. I mean, we talk about this project in terms of this map, but it's very different when you're there. And I would invite all of you, and I want to make a standing invitation to all of the council members and anyone else for that matter to contact me and come out and sit on that property line with me and really reflect on whether or not this is a wise use of the tone of our little community there. And residential housing is one thing, but commercialization is another, or kind of loose plans for multifamily dwellings is even another one. And so when you're out there and you're living that, and you're not talking about it relevant to a map, but you're actually living this and you're seeing this every day, and it's impossible not to worry about the noise pollution and the traffic and the potential crime and the trespassing and all of those which are very real issues. And like I've expressed before, I have complete respect for the Becketts. They've been friends of my family even before I entered this world. That's not the issue. The issue is, can we address this, and with that development, to keep in the tone of how we live there and not expand it into these areas of commercialization and such that, are slowly creeping into these other parts of our lives. And so I want to please, again, invite any of you to come out and just sit there or park at my lower garage. You're free to park there. Come in anytime and then just walk that line and look at this in your mind's eye and look at the neighboring community and see how you feel about it and feel if in your heart that really, if this is really the right thing. And I know this is a little bit of an emotional plea, but that's real too.
Okay.
It is real. And then the second issue really quickly that I'd like to make is in my other two statements, I asked for some information about barriers that would be provided for those of us who have immediate perimeters on this development. Again, having to do, I have 36 acres of woods and trails, and part of my intent has always been to protect wildlife and such. Of course, I'm worried about trespassers. Of course, I'm worried about littering. And so what kind of barriers would you all provide, would the developer provide in terms of protecting all of our properties that run across those proposals?
Thank you,
So thank
Kathy.
you. I know I'm speaking on them all, but thank you very much.
And we will ask Mr. Long to respond to the barriers. If you have intent at this point in time, Mr. Long. And we must remember that the Becketts do own this ground. When someone owns the ground, they do have a priority of determination as to what shall happen with that ground. So, Mr. Long.
Within zoning regulations,
Within-
correct?
Yes.
Which this council is listening
Right.
to, correct?
But, right, exactly. But remember, the Municipal Planning Commission has passed this.
Yeah,
It will
they have
take
passed it.
6 votes
Oh, I
of
don't
our
disagree.
council to overturn municipal planning in their vote. Mr. Long, would you respond, please?
Well, at this time, a portion of her line, I'm not sure that I really can respond, other than it will come, the portion that's P and D, it will definitely come back to not only the planning commission, but also here. And any type of, any of the P and D requirements will be met. So I guess my response is, at a minimum, whatever the code requires.
All right. So municipal planning will have that voice.
Mrs. Vale, if I might
Yes, thank
add,
you.
in the agreement, that hasn't come up tonight, but before annexation took place, we had an agreement with the Monroe Township trustees. And in that agreement, it says that along this line of annexation, that the requirement there would be a requirement of development there if it was remarkably different than what's there. So in Mrs. Lucas's case, if we're talking about a housing subdivision, that's different than what her 36 acres, I think that's what she has there. So there would be at least that area to
At the
give it consideration.
by the P and D area.
Well, also it was the
And the
agreement pretty well covered the entire boundary
All right.
between the area that was annexed and the area that remains in the township. So it would cover not only P and D, but also the residential.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other persons wishing to speak? In either way, for or against? Council,
If I could, I'll be brief. I have attended those meetings. I've heard concerns from those sitting there. I've listened to the Beckett's, and I do, in a way, appreciate what they're trying to do here. I've had some of the concerns, and not only what Mrs. Lucas has, not only what the Focus 2100 plan says, and I invite you all to go to the section in the Focus 2100 plan and see what it says about preserving farmland. That was some people put together about what the future of Knox County should look like. That being said, I have some major concerns. The general business that they're talking about, maybe it's not going to be a giant eagle, but that's 3 times the size of what the Staples lot is that I work in. So picture that as not a big box store, but a lot of little box stores. Staples, we had a traffic number that we talked about at Planning Commission. There's a lot of cars going in and out of there.
so what size is that piece of ground? Do you know?
Yeah, it was brought up at the Planning Commission meeting. I think Cameron said it was 4 acres.
Staples ground?
The Staples ground was, I believe, was equivalent about 4 or 5 acres. If it's 5, it's 5, so that's 2.5 times. But that's still a lot of commercial that can go in there. One of the reasons I bring that up, that section where that's going in, I invite any of you to sit in the driveway that comes out there from the Jobs and Family Services Employment Center, the County Water Department, and also the Village Network. It's one driveway that comes out there. I invite any one of you to take a left-hand turn out of there almost any time of day. If this goes through, and what I've said a long time ago is not only the planning of this, there's got to be another piece planned for what we're going to do with traffic. You have a murderous zone. That is one section where you can pass somebody coming out of Coshocton Avenue and pass somebody coming out of Apple Valley. If we have to put in place, we have to start thinking about it now sooner than later of what we're going to do with that piece of traffic. I know we're talking 10 to 15 homes to begin with, but you still have to look to the future when you say a piece of property can hold 110 homes. And the future is now, not 10 years from now. There's a wreck almost weekly on Coshocton Avenue around the Walmart area. And it's just the amount of cars that we're putting on there. So we have to think about that. With that, when I got on council 9 years ago, I said I would not go across Gilcrest Road. I understand, everybody wants to be on Coshocton Avenue. We're reminded about that a lot. But before long, you keep saying yes. We're going to be knocking on Gambier's door. Thank you.
I'd like to just make one brief comment, and that is that any given time during the afternoon from the hours of 11 till 2, you tell me how you're going to go from Park Street to Upper Gilcrest Road. And the answer is you can't. Traffic is backed up all the way to Park Street. Now, we're trying to discuss putting more units and more traffic onto Coshocton Avenue when it can't handle itself. Okay, well, let's say you go down Upper Gilcrest Road. So now, people are gonna find a way to get from point A to point B. Now I got all the traffic on, what's the name of your?
New Gambier.
New Gambier.
Eastern Star Road, New Gambier Road.
New
all-
Gambier Road, these are residential areas. You know, so I feel really strongly for people who live in the residential areas to have to put up with traffic that is trying to get from point A to point B because we can't go down Shockton Avenue at any given time without waiting hours to get there. It just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, if somebody can show that I'm wrong, I'd be glad to listen to that.
Would
Thank
either
you.
of you gentlemen feel differently if this did not include general business area, if it were only residential?
No, because basically what I said, one, is annexation. We're just keep going further and further down the road. And two, what are you gonna do about the traffic, even if it's not general business? Upper Gilcrest Road, New Gambier Road, everybody knows what happened when we shut down Upper Gilcrest Road for those few days. There was cars going madly through neighborhoods. That's how many cars go on that now. People from New Gambier Road, if you haven't received a phone call from somebody that lives on New Gambier Road, I'll give you your number, so you can have those calls as well.
Okay. Mr. Fair, do you have any further?
No, ma'am, that's just my opinion.
Does anyone else on council have
Real
anything to
quick,
say? Yeah.
because I remember Kathy from the last meeting we gathered together, that was when we voted on the annexation. It was guaranteed that there would be a buffer put in to adjoining property.
That's what we spoke of.
Right.
No, that's correct.
So when you stood up here, Mr. Long, and said, I'm not quite sure, that there's an agreement, there's a buffer to go between abutting property. It's all in what that buffer would be.
And I personally haven't read that agreement, so I apologize. I just didn't know.
And that's what they want clarification of, is what's this buffer gonna be? Is it gonna be a great big chain link fence? Is it gonna be a pine tree? What's the buffer gonna be that's gonna set between her property and the annex property? And I'm just clarifying this because she's asking and she's wanting to know, and she got no answer whatsoever. So
Well,
she just
John,
wants to get-
let me play a little bit of defense here. Mr. Long, if he hasn't read that township agreement, it has nothing to do with his development. That has all the things to do with the city township agreement. And that's why we can sit here as administration, as council, you know that's in place. So the fact that, I think Mr. Long's comment was about the P&D, and they could have some input there. But if this is all residential out here, this then falls back to that agreement. So it's pretty difficult to point the finger if in fact the city's going to be responsible for enforcing that.
But with our agreement, there's a buffer gonna be put in place.
Absolutely.
All right.
Nancy?
Yes.
Well, I'm listening to everybody, and I sympathize with what they're saying. But when you get down to it, are we going to be able to tell someone that owns a property, you know, you can't do what you want on it because I don't like it? I mean, that's what it's basically getting down to. Mike and John, the problem on Coshocton Road isn't the Beckett's problem.
They'll add to it, that's what we're
Adds
trying to
to
They
say.
add to it, but it's not their problem.
So if they wanted to
It's
build.
our problem. We
So
need to
if-
correct it.
what you're
They own
telling
the
me-
land, and you're telling them they can't do what they
So I'm
want with
gonna ask,
their
I'm gonna be
land.
devil's advocate here. They wanna do that all in general business. They wanna pave it, put up buildings, make it a supermarket, make it strip malls, whatever, all general business. You don't have a problem with that either.
That's not what they're asking to be zoned
No,
for.
answer the question, please, because you just said you couldn't tell them what to do.
That I would because of the area.
So you would tell them what to do.
I would not tell them what to do. I would
Thank
vote
you.
against it. There's a
Same di-
difference.
There is.
Because, I mean, like with the neighbors, I'm sure when she had her 36 acres, at one time, that probably was a farm of 200 acres. And maybe they didn't want that 36 with that house on it. That's just the way progress goes.
So progress
The
should be
only way you can
refined.
stop it is to buy it yourself. Then you can control it. Now, you know, Mike's complaining about where he works, but he's got a job.
I'm
If
sorry,
that
I did
wasn't
not complain about, you weren't listening.
Pulling out onto
I
Coshocton
said,
Road.
go up to where Jobs and Family Service, the Knox County Water Department, and the Village Network. Sit there and try to take a left turn. I never brought up pulling out of the Staples at this meeting.
Well, you have in the past.
Thank you.
You have in the past. I'm just saying, traffic control isn't their problem, that's really ours in the state.
And I said, we need to address it now, not 2 months from now, not 2 years from now, not 10 years, now.
Well, I think they can do what they want because they can just not be annexed.
Thank you.
They're already annexed.
Yeah.
They're
You
already
voted yes on that,
This is
Janice,
simply
you
the
voted yes
Okay.
on that already.
This is the
But so we have some control over it. So you've got to get 6 people up here because the zoning commissioner, they've already passed
They
it.
passed
So
it.
Right.
they're saying it's okay.
Yeah.
But the annexation, you already voted for a while
Yes,
back.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And it's going to be difficult not to get, for it to be approved. It's going to be difficult.
It's going to be a difficult situation for
Yes.
each one of us because we have to search our own thoughts and feelings. But we will be giving this 3 readings, and I would like to, Mr. President, I would like to ask that persons who have something that they want to say further might be given that opportunity at one of our meetings, at least at the last meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be very fair.
Before we vote on this.
Absolutely fair.
And you will be governed to 3 minutes at that point.
Mrs. Bill, you might remind them too, we all have phone numbers, we all have email addresses.
Yes.
So if you didn't feel comfortable speaking tonight, please give us a call.
Mike, where I live, it was all farmland. And now it's not at all. And it's not that bad. I'm sorry.
I guess those are the people I need to talk to. It's not that bad.
Also, this Saturday at SIPS at 8:30, some city council people will be there. If people want to come and have an informal discussion with
Yes,
us, we'll be there.
feel free
then.
to come and visit with us on Saturday morning at 8:30 at 6, if you'd like. We certainly respect and appreciate all of you being here for this hearing, and no matter how it is that this culminates, know that we do care about everybody. We can't vote 2 ways. Whatever way it goes doesn't mean that we disrespect those in whose favor the vote does not go. So please know that we do want to hear from you, and when you contact one person, please be in touch with all of us. Yes, sir?
Speak up, we can't hear you back here. I've got a hearing aid,
You can't hear me?
just a very little bit.
I thought I was really speaking up. Okay. I simply said that we do respect everyone who is here. We do appreciate your having been here with us. We are listening to you, and the vote cannot go 2 ways. It's going to go one way or the other. It takes 6 votes to override municipal planning's vote to accept the zoning as it has been presented. We will be meeting down at SIPS on Saturday morning just for informal discussion, as we always do on the first Saturday morning of each month, unless there is something that preempts that for any one of us or all of us. So if you wish, plan to stop in and let us hear from you at that time if you have something further that you'd like to say to enlighten us. We appreciate your having been here, and Dr. and Mrs. Beckett, we appreciate your patience and your interest and your promises of doing this in a right manner. But we hope too that you will respect the concerns of the people here. I remember when ground developed behind you, and you too were concerned about what might happen. That was farm ground, and you went through the same kind of feelings and the same thing that these folks are going through. So we all have to try to live together and respect one another. And hopefully this will be the same this time as it always should be. Thank you.
Excuse me.
This hearing is adjourned, and we are now in recess until the legislative portion of this meeting, which will be at 7:30. So in recess for 9 minutes.
L6.com.